Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm sure some more people will join a little bit later. Thank you all for joining and joining early for our September education call on emergency preparedness. Today, one of our board members for both DVC and the DVC Education Center, Mike Guffey, is online to share his expertise not only as a ESRD patient, but as someone who deals with emergency management on a daily basis. So Mike, if you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Okay. I'll give a little background very briefly, how I backed into this. Before I even had kidney failure, I worked for a financial institution in the Midwest, and for the past dozen years have led the business continuity for the bank. We're in a regional area, so we've dealt with a lot of things, dealt with tornadoes, dealt with impact from hurricanes, dealt with crazy winter weather, flooding, fires, pretty much you name it, and we've dealt with it at some point. Since I was on dialysis and now have a transplant and have been involved with DPC, I've also been involved with CASER, which is the kidney emergency preparedness group, particularly for kidney patients. And I'm currently the co-chair of the Pandemic and Infectious Disease Committee. So having some experience with that as well. So it's a little of the background. So I'm going to try and keep this pretty general. I'm not going to try and list every disaster known to man and what to do with it, but just some general suggestions, hopefully, that are helpful to everybody. With that, Christy, if you want to. So this is National Preparedness Month for 2016. So you may see things around your clinics, things from the government. I got a couple of emails today bringing up again about communicating. The theme this year really is about planning, which ties in very nicely to a lot of what I would like to stress today. Today's goals really are to go through preparedness, some general planning tips, to talk a little bit about natural emergencies, and then finally talk a little bit about medical emergencies. And the topic, I think, is on everybody's mind somehow right now, which is the ZIKA virus. So I think we're ready. My key word for today is prepare. A couple of things with it that, again, I'm not going to try and tell you every time. I have people where I work who say, can you give me a list of every disease that exists and what we should do to be prepared for it? That's really impossible to do, and really it's not a matter of being prepared for every type of disease. Look for things that are likely, look for things that are common, but it's also looking for a standard response to what you do with an illness. And the other thing is about preparedness is if you wait until you have an emergency to get ready, it doesn't go well. From a personal standpoint, from a company standpoint, anything else. I have a person I've worked with for years that's always told me that he quotes that, are you smarter than a fourth grader? That when you get under stress, you can lose 2 to 3 years worth of education, and does not help to try and be planning on the fly when that happens. So the goal really is to have things in advance, do things when you're thinking about it, when you have a chance, and not be scrambling to try and put things together only when there is an emergency. Everybody goes through 3 stages in the way you deal with emergencies. It's natural. It deals with life in general. There's denial. There's deliberation, where you're trying to think about different options, trying to come up with all the possibilities, and then decisive action. So really the goal is plan, be prepared ahead of time, and be ready to go straight to step 3 when the activity happens. Yeah, the next thing's key really is reviewing what you've done. It's great to have a plan, but you've got to make sure everybody knows what your plans are, that you remember what your plan is. So you need to practice it on a regular basis when possible. Make sure that if you've created a plan and you've got a list of contacts, that if your contacts change, you update the plan. That's an easy one that people sort of forget about, is they won't update plans if they change a doctor, if their prescription medicine changes. And then when it's time for an emergency, oh, wait a second, I don't have that on the list. Another thing that's really key is when you're dealing with children is to keep it light and entertaining. If you go look, one of the resources I'll point out is the Cancer Coalition, and the address for them is at the end of the slides, and we can get it to you as well afterwards. It's keeping it light and entertainment. They've got a bunch of entertaining slides dealing with dogs as characters, dealing with animals, trying not to make preparedness scary to them. The other things you can do is make it sort of absurd. There are a lot of areas ready. A lot of the schools and a lot of schools and colleges will use zombies as an approach. How do you plan for a zombie attack? Not something really real, not something really threatening to a child. So they won't be focused on, what do you mean mom's getting hurt? What do you mean this is happening? My house burned. The dog ran away. It's how do you keep it so that they aren't scared, but they're paying attention to the message you're trying to get across. My final thing is always do what's reasonable within your means. Just because there's a chance of something, you don't have to go overboard. You don't have to have a full-scale generator to run your power if there's a chance of a power outage. You don't need to have a nuclear shelter in the backyard because there is a chance, there's a slight chance there could be some sort of a nuclear-type accident or nuclear-type attack or terrorist attack. Be reasonable. Always do what's within your means. Don't overreact to these things. There's a general planning. That was from the CDC, and they still have that up on their website, a zombie pandemic and how to do preparedness. Just sort of a little lightening from it, but it is their way of doing it. And they have a whole comic book, a whole set of things that are done in a comic book setting to try and teach, here's what you're doing, here's how you should react. But it's not, in spite of the fact it's a darker cover, I mean, it's not a really scary situation, so that would be. So the first thing I would say is to develop general planning. I'll give some examples we go through here, is to develop a contact card. It has key information both for you and your medicines, but also where you're going, how to get a hold of you, something that you could also give the children, give anybody else in your family to look at, and be able to give instructions. You always want to be able to determine a meeting place ahead of time, and it may be a matter of a couple of options, depending on the situation, but determine where you want to have your family meet, have that practice, have everybody know, and make sure, again, the children, anybody that needs help getting to those places knows more than just it's grandma's house, and it's across the street from a park, to know here's what the address is, here's a phone number, so if I can get through and make a call, or somebody else can call and say, I found somebody, but making sure that can be done. The third thing is really assembling a preparedness kit, and it can be a pretty basic kit with some things, and I've got a couple of examples, again, later in the presentation. And the fourth one is really preparing for after the emergency. What are you going to do when it's over? How are you going to let everybody know you're going back? How are you going to let your clinic know when you're back, or how are you going to get a hold of your clinic to see when they're ready, if they have to close or have any issues, how they're ready for you. Again, lack of preparedness will lead to a little confusion with it. So here's a contact card, and there's a couple of samples at the back later in this. But you need to have some standard information that are available. Great examples of the cards are available online at thecancercoalition.com or READY.GOV. And there are a lot of them things you can fill in online and then print if you've got the internet connection and printer. If not, there are ways to get them offline. But just some standard information. Have your personal contact information, household member information, so you know everybody that lives in your household. They're all accounted for. The meeting place, again, and contact information, phone number, name, pretty exact, exact directions on where it is. If it's a public place and not a family member's home, again, as much direct information as you can get so everybody knows. And so somebody who gets lost, gets confused, can say, this is where I need to be. It's important, especially with kidney patients, to have medical information. Know your doctor's name and doctor's contact information. Have your insurance information. Have the information about your dialysis clinic, including both their normal information and their emergency information. Sorry, I just locked myself. Okay, sorry. Having your medication information, the names of the medication, the dosages, the frequency, and the prescription information if you have that prescription number, so it makes it easier to call it in if you need to. Having the pharmacy information, and having other special requirements that you may have medically. If there are other special things you need, if you need oxygen, if you need other things than the normal, what are those type items? Again, if somebody finds you or is trying to help you, can put that information together. Also having transportation information. What is your regular transportation to and from the clinic if it's not yourself? And having some backup transportation or idea. You know, in an emergency, is there somebody else that you know that you should call? Is there a family member? What else could you call? Is there, you know, if you really need it, could you call a taxi company to get in your community to get there? How would you get to dialysis if you really needed to, or to your backup place? So there's a sample of the card from the CASER Coalition with the information. Next one is to determine a meeting place. Make sure everybody knows where to meet in case home is not accessible. I will say the first thing is, if your home is accessible, the best place to be is home. Wait for people